mention. We're live. Okay. Call the meeting to order at 5:30 p.m. I'm going to quickly leave a note. So Mayor Nagel sends his regrets. He's absent due to a family medical emergency. So I'm going to be chairing the meeting tonight for the first time. So I appreciate the patience. First off, we're going to adopt the agenda, but we do have to add a closed session item. So can I please get a motion from council to add before 11A, exception under section 29 1G of the Access to Information Act, advice from officials. Motion?
I so move.
Councillor Fideko moves. Can I get a vote? All in favor? Okay, passed unanimously. Nothing on the consent agenda, so we'll move on. Adoption of the previous minutes. Did everyone get a chance to look at the minutes? Can we ask for a motion to accept the minutes of May 4th, 2026, regular council meetings as attached? Can I get a motion, please?
I so move.
Councillor McFadden, and vote. Passed unanimously. We have no public hearings and no delegations, so I'd like to call Christine Raves, Intergovernmental Relations, to the podium to present the 2026 AB Munis resolution submission.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. Tonight, I am pleased to bring forward Cochrane's proposed AB Munis resolutions for Council support. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to review the AB Munis resolutions process and timeline, the proposed 3 resolutions for Council's consideration, and to seek Council support for the resolutions. So Alberta Municipalities, or AB Munis, is a province-wide association that represents and advocates for Alberta's cities, towns, villages, and other urban municipalities. A resolution directs AB Munis to advocate to the Government of Alberta or the Government of Canada on behalf of these municipalities. Resolutions are voted for on each fall at the annual AB Munis Fall Convention. And if a majority of members vote in favor, it's adopted as advocacy direction. Resolutions must be approved by a municipalities council and a seconder before being submitted to AB Munis. Because Cochrane has a population over 10,000, AB Munis rules dictate that our seconder must be a municipality with a population of under 10,000. I'll note quickly here that AB Munis board must approve the resolution even if it's approved by a municipalities council. To my knowledge, Cochrane has never had a resolution brought forward at AB Munis, so this is the first time we will be taking advantage of this advocacy approach. This is our timeline. We started out with a call out to council and administration for potential resolutions, and we ended up with 12 suggestions. Administration worked through these 12 to identify the top options for council's consideration. We also shared the options with AB Munis to seek their feedback and to get a sense of where other municipalities may support the proposals. In March, we had a council workshop to seek initial feedback, and Mayor Nagel also attended AB Munis to garner support from towns and villages to see who might be interested in seconding our proposals. Since this time, administration has worked on drafting the resolutions with potential seconders as well as AB Munis. We're at the red dot now, seeking sponsorship from council. Following this, we'll confirm our seconders and submit to AB Munis board for consideration. And again, if approved by the board, municipalities will vote on whether to adopt these resolutions as advocacy direction during the fall 2026 AB Munis Convention and Trade Show from September 23rd to 25th. This slide shows the considerations that went into each of the 12 submissions, so administration could narrow down the options. We reviewed each using a consistent approach, asking the following questions. Does it align with council's advocacy priorities and AB Munis strategic plan? Does it align with GOA's priorities? Are there other avenues for advocacy? And which of these topics would likely resonate most strongly with the broader AB Munis membership and with the board? This analysis led us to our first resolution. This one is about broadening the scope of offsite levies. It advocates for amendments to the Municipal Government Act to broaden the scope of infrastructure eligible for offsite levies. It's intended to reflect the full range of growth-related infrastructure required to support new development, such as outdoor recreation, transit infrastructure, municipal operations, and other capital infrastructure required to deliver services. It's meant to apply where municipalities demonstrate a clear connection between growth and infrastructure required. It maintains transparency, predictability, and fairness for municipalities, developers, and residents. The town of Penhold is our seconder for this resolution, and I am pleased to inform council that they approved this resolution at their council meeting on May 4th. The second resolution we're bringing forward is about advocating to the Government of Alberta to restore policy support for perpetual conservation easements. Our advocacy is very specific to this being a voluntary land stewardship tool. It's meant to help ensure municipalities, landowners, and conservation organizations have access to this option where locally supported. The town of Innisfail is our potential seconder for this resolution, and they are also bringing their motion forward to council today, so we'll keep you posted on how that results. And we also have a surprise third resolution. The city of Airdrie is leading on this one, and they reached out to other mid-sized cities and asked if anyone would be willing to co-sponsor the resolution with them. Airdrie will take the lead on identifying a seconder, and they took the lead on drafting the resolution. But in terms of co-sponsoring, this might be of interest to council given Cochrane's significant growth. It proposes to advocate to the Government of Alberta to create a framework used during provincial surpluses to allocate a portion of the surplus to critical municipal infrastructure projects. It's meant to prioritize projects based on demonstrated need and readiness for construction, and funding would be distributed through a transparent application process. Administration's recommended actions tonight are that council sponsor the broadening scope of offsite levies resolution and the restoring provincial support for perpetual conservation easement resolution. It's also recommending that council co-sponsor the budget surplus and municipal infrastructure investment resolution for consideration during the 2026 AB Munis Convention. Recognizing that a council resolution is required for each of the proposals in order for AB Munis to accept them, I'll just clarify here that administration is seeking 3 separate motions from council for each of the resolutions covered. Thank you, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. So we need 3 motions. I think it's probably best to go through the first, obviously. Can I please get a motion for the first line to accept it as information to broaden the scope of offsite levies resolution? Is to accept as information.
I'm a little bit unsure. So everybody's patient. I'm working today off my cell phone. So the recommended action for this first one, as I understand it, is that council sponsor the broadening scope of offsite levies resolution for consideration during the 2026 Alberta Munis Convention. Is that the appropriate language here?
Correct.
Excellent. And so I certainly support this one. I know our council has talked about various ways that we can offset the requirements and the cost of growth to our residents. And I think certainly in having conversations with colleagues around the region, I think this is something that many municipalities would benefit from. So certainly appreciate bringing this forward as an advocacy option to Alberta urban municipalities.
Okay, did we get a motion? You made a motion? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Can we have a question? Okay, Councillor McDonald.
I'm not sure if it's too soon to ask this, Christine, but do you have any sense yet of how Bill 28 is going to interact with our resolution here?
Through the chair to Councillor McDonald. So Bill 28 appears to propose further limitations or clarifications on offsite levies. And so the way this resolution would interact with it, if it was passed, if it was supported by council and then the AB Munis board and then the membership, how it would interact with it is essentially in the reg development. I think there's twofold. So one would be ongoing advocacy for the expansion of offsite levies, which is what AB Munis can do for us over long term. I think shorter term, AB Munis is involved in regulation development. They work very closely with the government of Alberta. So how regulations under that bill, if it's passed in the Legislative Assembly, AB Munis could help advocate for clarification and further expansion on that.
Okay. Okay. So if Bill 28 further restricts OSLs, this resolution pushing through will be just another mechanism for us to maybe find more clarity and maybe someday have a little bit of movement on this. Yeah, okay. That's it. Thank you.
No more questions? Okay, call it to the question. Can we vote on the first motion? All in favor? Okay, first one's passed unanimously. Now we'll go through the second one. Can I get a motion to support the resolution to restore provincial support for perpetual conservation easements? Okay, Councillor McDonald.
I will make that motion.
Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Oh, Councillor Singh.
I have a couple of questions and follow-ups, if I may. Thank you, administration, for bringing this forward. I appreciate the intent behind protecting environmentally and agriculturally significant land, and I recognize conservation easements have historically been one tool available to support stewardship and long-term planning. My first question would be, is around the alignment with the current provincial direction. How does this proposed advocacy differ from the recent provincial policy change under the private land conservation program and legislation such as Bill 28?
Through the chair to Councillor Singh. Okay, so I would start with how it aligns with GOA's priorities. I think GOA is very focused on growth and affordability. One of the things this resolution proposes to do is an optional tool for land stewardship, which is essentially a planning tool. It identifies where you can plan for development as well as where you can't plan for development. So while the change in the grant program through the government of Alberta has restricted the timeline between 25 and 50 years, we would argue that actually understanding where perpetual development cannot occur would help clarify development. In terms of Bill 28, there's no overlap that I can identify at this time in terms of specific land conservation. Yeah.
So follow up on that, could you clarify what specific gaps currently exist under the provincial framework? For example, are municipalities or landowners presently unable to achieve certain conservation outcomes using the existing term-based easement structures?
Through the chair to Councillor Singh, so the existing grant program will only fund term easements, so only between 25 and 50 years, not perpetual. And so once the 50 years are up, then there's either a reapplication or it's no longer eligible. It has to go through the program. So the gap is that it's just a limited conservation easement under the existing grant program. Anything after 50 years isn't eligible.
I'm still trying to understand. So would this be intent to reverse the province's current approach, or is it more about ensuring municipalities and landowners continue to have the perpetual easement available, one optional tool, or?
Yes, so what it aims to do is instead of limiting the current program to 50 years, it would just be any timeline to, like if the landowners only wanted to do it to 50 years, then they could do it to 50 years. But if we advocated for this, then there would be no time limit. Landowners could do it in perpetuity. So that would be the change, if I'm understanding your question correctly.
So I put in a simple term in there. So let's say I'm a landowner and I don't want anything to develop on my land. Would it restrict anything, or is it just for funding agreements, or what is that? Like, what are we doing this for this?
Thank you. Sorry for the confusion there. So it would prevent development on their land. if they applied for it and it was, so they would get funded for having no development on their land.
So currently it's only till 50 years,
Yes.
and after 50 years, I have to apply again in there.
Councillor Singh, I think one of the conversations we had with the town of Innisfail, I think would help provide some context, because they had a few questions, and we wanted to just, the importance for us was to provide another tool, certainly from administration's perspective, having another tool, working with landowners, providing them an opportunity, and as Ms. Raves has said, it's a voluntary tool, so we're not forcing anybody into this decision, but we have an opportunity where it does provide certainty where lands are protected in perpetuity. There is the provinces program where it can be up to 50 years, but in many situations, I think it would be valuable for us or other municipalities in the province to have an option to go for perpetual easements, because we want to protect those in the long term.
So follow up to that. So along those same lines, what authority would remain with the province in future regarding those lands? For example, even if a perpetual easement is established, are there circumstances where future provincial policy or legislation could alter or override those arrangements?
Once those are registered as an easement, I don't believe that they can be reversed, Councillor Singh. That's a perpetual easement, so I don't believe there would be an opportunity for the government to change that, if this resolution was supported and went through the entire process.
Okay. I'll wait for my fellow council colleagues.
Councillor McFadden?
Thank you very much. So just for clarity for myself, so this is speaking towards the funding program that the province allows to support the perpetual conservation easement. So this just affects, you could still put a permanent conservation easement on your property. You're just not able to avail yourself of the provincial funding. You could avail yourself of federal funding. I think they have various programs that would allow you to do this. But the way I see this is that this is, the province trying to perhaps limit these perpetual easements. And from a personal philosophy, and I think one that a lot of our residents share, who value conserving the environment as much as we can, and certainly Cochrane has perhaps benefited more than most from having landowners that value conserving of the lands around us. So the Glenbow Ranch Provincial Park, while not being through a conservation easement, is an example of landowners looking ahead about how they can conserve lands for future generations. And then one that is a perpetual conservation easement is the Wineglass Ranch. So Cochrane has been a beneficiary of this forward thinking by some very generous landowners, and certainly much appreciated. So this, in supporting this supporting this to the Alberta municipalities, we really would be advocating for the province to reconsider their direction on this. I think conserving the environment, conserving the areas around our municipalities, especially urban areas, is extremely valuable and of a high interest to our residents. And so yes, this would be advocating in a direction that the municipality is, or that the province is currently looking to go towards, but I certainly think advocacy from ourselves and perhaps by our other municipal partners could perhaps help them see the error of their ways and reflect on a priority. So in ourselves, in advancing this to the Alberta municipalities, is not necessarily saying that this is even going to be adopted by the Alberta municipalities. This is us advocating that we want to take it to that, and you'll remember the resolution sessions last year, hundreds of delegates gather around, and there's an opportunity to argue the pros and cons, and then if it does pass, then it would be added to the different advocacy issues that Alberta municipalities partakes. And having been participated in the Alberta municipalities groups and through the governance committee itself, any of the lobbying or advocacy work that is done very respectfully and trying to advance in collaboration both what the province is trying to achieve and what municipalities are trying to achieve. So in advancing and supporting this resolution, I don't see Cochrane in any way as trying to be antagonistic. We're just trying to provide a different lens. And so certainly this is a resolution that has, a decision that has my support. I think anything we can do to encourage conservation, preservation in our province is a good thing, and I'd certainly like to make sure that we have as many tools available to both ourselves and the landowners in our neighborhood to maybe find some different answers about how we could all best benefit by conserving it. The other piece I'd like to put out there is the 25 to 50 years. I don't know that it necessarily does provide conservation. A lot of these larger real estate investment firms will invest and buy land 20, 30, 40 years out, knowing that at some point they're going to be able to get the full value of it. So one of the concerns I have with this is it actually allows a developer to benefit twice, which is perhaps not fair to the residents and generally in just conserving the landscape around us. So those are my lens on it. Very much support it, but we'll pass it over to my colleagues.
Councillor Federico?
Thank you. I actually don't necessarily have a question about this one in particular. I support all of them, but I just don't know where to ask the question. Is there any disadvantage of us bringing 3 different resolutions forward? Because if I were to pick in the scope of kind of numbering them of like 1 to 3 for highest priority, I don't know if this would be my highest one. So I'm just kind of curious if there's any disadvantage of us bringing all 3 forward.
Through the chair to Councillor Federico, thank you for the question. I don't see any disadvantage to it, especially because we have different seconders and because the city of Airdrie is taking the lead on the 3rd one, and I think that one applies to mid-size broadly. They're reaching out to more than just us. So that one would be our name under an umbrella of other names as well. But I think between the 2 that would have our name, because we have different seconders, I think that speaks to the way these resolutions resonate with other municipalities across Alberta. So I think it works to our favor. I think anything more might dilute the process, but I think we're in good shape here.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McFadden?
Yeah, just speaking through the political lens of having been through different resolution sessions over the years, I don't see any downside to advocating for more than one. As I understand the next steps, I don't think they've changed dramatically. So we make our decision today. This also then goes to the Alberta Munis Governance Committee, and then they decide which ones do show up on the resolution book, in case there's overlap or some that don't make sense. One of the changes they've made in recent years is to make sure you have a seconder from a different type of municipality to make sure that any of the work that they are advocating for across the province is more broadly supported. I know historically some of the resolutions that were coming to the table were very narrowly focused, so there's just been an evolving governance lens about how this is done, but in my experience I don't see how this would weaken anything at all. I actually think it's great that Cochrane is stepping into this space and leading the conversation on 2. And certainly the budget surplus municipal infrastructure investment, I think this has come up in previous years. And it's one, I think that certainly mid-sized cities, but all municipalities would benefit from making sure that the province is, in the good years, saving for those lean years, because, infrastructure needs to be funded regardless of whether it's a good year or a lean year. So I'd support all of them, but to the question of whether I see any downside to this, in my experience, none at all.
Councillor Singh?
Just a follow-up before, would there be an opportunity to work collaboratively with the province to identify a balanced framework that support both the long-term conservation goals and future land use flexibility where appropriate? Or is it done deal kind of thing we support here and?
Through the chair to Councillor Singh, AB Munis, if a resolution is passed by the membership, they'll often work with the members to rework the resolution in a way that fits, current priorities, and they, reach out to whomever is sponsoring it and seconding it to work with them. So I would say if we have more to add to it, if it's passed, we can certainly reach out to AB Munis and share that, as well as our seconder and other communities that are interested.
Okay. Any more questions? I'm guessing no, so we'll call it to question. All in favor? Okay, and Then the last one, I need a motion to co-sponsor the budget surplus and municipal infrastructure investment resolution. So can I get a motion? Councillor Singh?
Yeah,
any-
budget surplus and municipal infrastructure.
Any questions? No? Okay, I'll call that one to question 2. All in favor? Okay, and I think that's it. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you, Council.
And that brings us to 7B. Adam Mildenberger from Transit Program Lead. He's going to come to the podium to present the Colt Transit System Performance Update. Oh,
Madam
yeah,
Chair, I'll just
sorry.
take a second to recuse myself if I may. Can you come get me from the back room once we're done this topic?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor and Council, for having me tonight. I'm going to be giving you an update tonight on the performance of our transit system, how we've been operating, what are the changes we recently made in August when we launched the fixed routes, and what we can foresee in the future with some of the options for improving our transit efficiency and levels of service. So in late 2019, the town of Cochrane launched what was called a pilot project. It was purchasing 8 mid-sized cutaway buses. Those are 21-person capacity buses. Those are low-floor seating with 1 wheelchair spot per bus, gasoline-powered buses. We initiated a contract with Southland for operations, dispatch, and maintenance of the fleet. So we own the fleet, Southland operates, and the drivers are staff of Southland. We introduced an on-request booking system that's called the Colt app, provided by Rideco. And customers can book trips on the on-request system up to 1 week in advance. The town also introduced 149 designated bus stops. And the system, again, was launched in 2019, referred to as a 5-year pilot project at that time. So what were some of the key findings that came out of this project? Well, it was found that approximately 50% of total searches were classified as either being failed or canceled. So that's a high proportion of potential trips that did not occur due to various capacity issues with the system. Many residents were identified to be booking trips, multiple trips to secure future spots, either with or without the intention of canceling multiple spots. This would limit the capacity for other residents to fill those slots and reduce the create inefficiencies in the system. Most of the trips were between the downtown area and the residential neighborhoods surrounding the downtown, and the busiest stop was the SLS Center. Travel times using the Colt on-request service was rated as approximately 5 to 10 minutes on average longer than your typical vehicle. So you can see that the key issue that was identified was a lack of capacity in the system. And you can look at it another way. It's not just a lack of capacity, it was higher demand than what the system could service. This created also a communications and public relations issue, because the town would frequently receive comments from residents concerning empty buses, but the inability to book the trip that I want to book. So this created a bit of a disconnect in what residents were seeing, but what they were experiencing when trying to book a trip. So this obviously resulted in frustrations. So in February of 2025, the town, in collaboration with an outside consultant, completed a study to evaluate the system and chart a path forward to improving the system's levels of service. This report went to council in late February of 2025, and one of the outcomes of this report was the development of strategic objectives. So this includes improving the reliability and usefulness of the transit system, supporting safe, age-friendly, and accessible access to Cochrane, within Cochrane, ensuring that transit is part of the planning process to meet the growing and diverse needs of the community, providing a transit service that is financially sustainable and appropriately scaled for the community, and connecting transit to broader community planning outcomes. In order to achieve these strategic objectives, one of the key recommendations of the report was the introduction of a hybrid transit system. So introducing fixed route transit in conjunction with our on-request service as more of a support service. So in August of last year, 2025, the town launched its new hybrid transit system. This consisted of 3 fixed routes with a 60-minute headway. So when we look at the ridership, approximately 70% of our riders now utilize the fixed route system, with the remaining 30% of total ridership using the on-request system. The 3 key fixed routes is Route 1, which is the Sunset route connecting Sunset to the downtown area. Route 2, which services Heritage Hills and Heartland, bringing them into the downtown area. And Route 3 being Fireside, bringing them north into the downtown area as well. And the various mixed use land uses available in the quarry area. Both routes 1 and 3 have connections at the SLS Center. Route 2, servicing Heritage Hills and Heartland, currently does not. We introduced a new digital payment app called the Hotspot app. It's an efficient app for managing payment to use the fixed route service, but we also maintained the Colt app for the booking of trips for our on-request service. So therefore we have 2 apps. This is an opportunity for improvement that we're going to be looking forward. Currently, our contract with Southland expires in fall of 2027, and the utilization of the RideCo app is tied to that contract. And our contract with Hotspot ends in July of 2028, so that's a 3-year contract with them. These are going to be opportunities for us to look at ways to improve the apps and consolidate them, but this is the typical approach that's taken across the industry. Peer municipalities such as Okotoks and Airdrie have the exact same structure as us, using Hotspot for payment on the fixed routes, and the Colt app or the RideCo supported booking for the on-request system. The on-request service is also maintained in the town in those neighborhoods around the periphery or in further proximity from our fixed routes. This is in order to maintain a level of transit service to those neighborhoods that currently do not have fixed route transit. Transit is offered on weekdays and Saturdays with fixed schedules. And there are currently opportunities to expand our fixed route transit system within our current operating budget. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a couple slides. So as I said, approximately 70% of total ridership has transitioned over to our fixed routes. And this is considered the higher performing service from a service efficiency standpoint. On average, our fixed routes are typically serving approximately 6 passengers per service hour, whereas comparatively the on-request service is serving approximately 4 passengers per hour. That's a 50% difference in productivity with the fixed route over the on-request service. So the fixed route is really driving better value for our operating dollars, and it better positions us for more sustainable growth as the town grows in population and spatially. More riders on the fixed routes equals more efficient use of every service hour that we provide residents. And this will continue to improve as we continue to transition more riders to our fixed routes. So as we improve the fixed route service and a greater proportion of our ridership uses that service, the efficiency and productivity of that service will improve as well. The fixed routes also cost approximately 40% less per passenger from a net operating cost perspective. This reduces the overall cost per trip across the entire system, and it supports the financial sustainability of the system as ridership grows. In summary, shifting riders to fixed routes lowers the cost of every trip the town delivers. As our population increases and as a greater proportion of our residents transition to fixed routes, the net operating cost of our fixed route per passenger will continue continually improve. Pardon me? With respect to the system performance of the on-request service, the ride rating is very high. So if you're one of the residents who are able to become a customer on the on-request service, you receive very good on-time performance, and the average ride rating is scored 4.9 out of 5 with the booking app, which is a very high score. However, the challenge occurs in trying to book that trip, trying to become the customer. So currently the service is overutilized. We have a conversion rate of 70%. That means approximately 70% of potential customers actually become customers. So there's about a 30% loss in potential customers due to the overutilization of the on-request service. This conversion rate is fairly consistent both pre and post-launch of our fixed routes. Before we had fixed routes, we had 5 buses dedicated to the on-request service. Once we launched the fixed routes, 70% of demand migrated away from the on-request service to fixed routes, but we also moved 3 out of the 5 buses over to the fixed routes as well, decreasing the supply in conjunction with the decrease in demand. So that's why it's fairly static, maintaining that 70% conversion rate. But there's a silver lining in that story regarding the conversion rate not changing. Although it is still 70%, the actual real number of unmet trips has dramatically decreased. So before we launched the fixed route system, in about 2024 and also in 2025, there was estimated at approximately 25,000 unmet trips per year that were not served that desired to have a trip. However, when we launched the fixed route system and a significant majority of our ridership transitioned to the fixed routes, now the unmet trips is only approximately 10,000. So it is 30% unmet trips, but it's a significant drop in the actual real numbers, and that's a positive story. And as we continue to improve our fixed route service, there's going to be many opportunities where we can continue to work away at that number to decrease the amount of unmet trips on the on-request service. The station is also evolving as the transit hub for the town of Cochrane. Fixed route and regional service converges at the station. We observe a higher utilization of this key capital investment for the town. It's become the primary hub for tickets, schedules, and transit information, with the vast majority of in-person ticket sales occurring here at the station. We've also introduced a new transit information wall at the station, providing live updates and information to riders about buses, departure times at the station, as well as other system information. And there's also improved customer access and wayfinding by dissemination of these hard copies of schedules and other information pamphlets available to customers. The station is now serving as the central access point for the entire transit system. Swift is also accessible at the station. As well, we do have a new private operator that is operating out of the station, Falcon Transportation Solutions, which is providing shuttle service between Cochrane and Calgary and Cochrane and Okotoks. There's also been a lot of strong early communication and positive customer experience between administration and the public on the improvements we've made with the fixed route launch. We're also receiving fewer daily customer inquiries regarding how to utilize the transit system. The Hotspot app has provided a much simpler fare payment option compared to the on-request Colt app. And overall, it's providing improved clarity and ease of system use for customers. So we're seeing a positive in public feedback, fewer inquiries, and an easier payment process with an improvement in convenience to ridership. Early indicators suggest improved customer experience and clear system navigation under the hybrid model. But what are some of the concerns we're hearing from riders? Firstly, the need to expand fixed route access. There are several existing neighborhoods that currently are only provided on request service with no immediate access to fixed route transit. There's still on request service limitations. So even though we did significantly reduce the number of customers not being served by the on-request system, there is still a number of customers that are frustrated with that insufficient capacity to meet their individual trip needs. And there's also been accessibility impaired transit needs communicated to administration. There has been inquiries about the need for door-to-door service, particularly for those with mobility issues. In general, improvements to local paratransit, and the current limited wheelchair capacity on our Colt buses, which is one wheelchair spot. As ridership grows, expectations are shifting toward more capacity, reliability, and accessibility of our local transit system. So how are we performing financially? Revenue is projected to increase by approximately 3.5% since 2025. This is primarily a result to population and thus ridership increase. Fares have not changed, and our transit fares have not changed since the system's inception in late 2019. Operating expenses are expected to remain largely flat with potentially a 0.5% increase. Although our operating contract with Southland does increase by 3% year over year to reflect the inflationary pressures on the operating costs that Southland incurs to operate the system, we were, administration, able to find cost savings by modernizing and improving the efficiency of some of our internal systems and how reporting is done and scheduling of drivers and things like that, that we're able to extrapolate out to at least $80,000 in annual savings. In general, the net operating expenses are expected to remain unchanged this year from last year. This year, we're projecting an approximate municipal operating contribution per capita of approximately $29, a 3% drop from last year. And our cost recovery this year is projected to be approximately 12%, an approximate 3% increase from last year's reported 11.7. Typically for a mid-sized municipality, such as the town of Cochrane, as you can see in the bottom right of the slide on the screen, an acceptable or baseline range of cost recovery would be 10 to 15%. Achieving 15 to 20% would be desirable or strong, and anything above 20% for a mid-sized municipality would be considered excellent. Larger municipalities such as City of Calgary or City of Edmonton can achieve cost recoveries in the range of 35, maybe up to 50%. With respect to our revenue, 80% of that consists of our fare sales. The remaining 20% is brought in from bus and bus bench advertising. And for our operating expenses, obviously the 90% is our operations contract with Southland. This is a snapshot of total system ridership since approximately 2021. You can obviously see that the glaring increase, significant increase year over year between 2021 and 2024 in total ridership, with a leveling off between 2024 and the current projections for 2026 based on the ridership we're seeing coming in Q1 of 2026. It's important to note that COVID really threw a wrench in the transit industry in 2020, and this significantly depressed ridership demand across all systems in North America. So when we look at 2021 to 2024, this is not a sustainable growth in ridership. This is a bounce back post-COVID. So we see plus 30% year over year increase, which is not normal. And then as we start to get plus 5 years away from COVID, we start to see the ridership increase normalize, and we're averaging approximately 2.5–3% over the past couple of years. Even with the launch of the fixed route, which is considered the fixed routes, which is considered an improvement in the level of service provided to our residents, any significant change to a transit system can disrupt things for existing transit users, and it can take a while to really uptick those new riders who could really benefit from the fixed routes. So even with a significant improvement that's considered a positive, it can typically be 6 to 18 months to establish normalized ridership patterns after a major service change. And just to give you some context on what has been experienced in other municipalities, you can see the same general patterns post-COVID in the town of Okotoks, as well as nationally in transit ridership across Canada. Since 2020, ridership has significantly been increasing year over year. And then as we start to near 4 to 5 years post-COVID, ridership increases start to normalize a little more flat and actually decreasing in some instances. On average, nationally, transit ridership, and this is pre-COVID, has been increasing at approximately 2% per annum. So what are some of the opportunities to improve our transit system as we continue to grow? Well, firstly, there's several opportunities to expand our existing fixed routes that can be done within our existing operating budget. So this map right here illustrates to you in the blue shaded areas the neighbors that are currently served by our 3 fixed transit routes. The purple areas are additional areas that our fixed routes are expected to be able to extend into and provide fixed service within our existing operating budget. So we pay Southland not based on the distance traveled, but based on the operating hours. So based on what we're seeing now with our on-time performance and the scheduling of our buses, we're projecting that this summer we'll be able to expand our 3 fixed routes even further while maintaining their current total 60-minute loop. This is largely because when we first launched the fixed routes, we were pretty conservative and built into our schedules potential delays incurred from a lot of the unknowns, that being congestion caused by the construction at the interchange, as well as the impacts of the rail crossings. We've been largely able to avoid most of the rail crossings, and the traffic impacts at the construction zones have largely subsided and the impacts are quite minimal. We actually don't have an issue of buses being late. We have an issue of buses arriving early, and this creates an opportunity for us to stretch out those fixed routes further. And then the yellow areas are other areas under consideration for further extension of our 3 fixed routes. We believe we can do it within our existing operating budget, but we are currently waiting for infrastructure improvements in order to make those leaps. So for example, North and Sunset, we're awaiting a further completion of the road network to be more circuitous, so the buses can come back down and circle around up to the northwest and Heritage Hills. As West Hawk furthers completion and we get more of a complete road network out there, we will be able to extend fixed route to the east and northeast. And also in the West Valley, West Terrace, and West Point areas, there has been discussions about maybe a potential future rail crossing improvement, at least to permit transit vehicles. It's a future project that's on our radar. There's no timing associated with that. But if that were to happen, that would create an opportunity for us to run a fixed route between Heartland down into that community across the rail line. And that would really open up that neighborhood for fixed route service. And then certainly in the Glenbow area, as infrastructure project, the infrastructure project in that area advances throughout this year, there will be a time, I believe, in fall later this year that we may be able to extend one of our fixed routes through that neighborhood. And then lastly, the red area, primarily south of the river, those are areas both existing, the Bow Ridge and Bow Meadows area, and future planned, that being the Rolling Range and Towers Trail and River Heights, and currently under construction, the South Bow Landing. Those development areas could also receive fixed routes, but we expect that would likely require a 4th fixed route, that our 3 fixed routes would likely be at their limits and not be able to be extended into those areas. And that would be for further detailed discussion in the coming years as we near closer to build out of those neighborhoods. So how do we improve our on-request system? Earlier in the presentation, I talked a little bit about some of the issues with unmet ridership. It's administration's recommendation that rather allocating more money to expanding the on-request service, the prudent approach from a service and cost-effective perspectives is to focus and prioritize our fixed route service. As we expand and improve our fixed route service, more riders will transition from on-request to fixed routes, and that will create additional capacity in our on-request service, resulting in an increased performance, being able to serve a greater number of riders. We're also looking at a strategy to right-size the fleet. So we have 8 Colt buses, 21-person vehicles. If we were to do a like-for-like replacement of those vehicles when they reach near end of life, the total capital cost could be in the order of approximately $2.4 million. However, specifically for our on-request service, we really do not need 21-person buses. Just due to the design of that type of service, those buses will never be full. We typically only see 3 to 4 riders on those on-request buses simultaneously during peak periods anyways. So we can achieve a significant cost savings per vehicle if we could allocate 3 smaller size vehicles to the on-request service, 2 specifically for the on-request and 1 for a spare to fit in when needed. And those vehicles also provide an additional benefit of more accessibility capacity, so more wheelchair capacity. So those types of vehicles, which would be about half the cost of a regular Colt bus, although providing maybe 8 regular passenger seats, could provide up to 3 wheelchair spots, which would fill a bit of a gap in our local paratransit needs as well. In total, if we were to follow more of this right-size fleet replacement strategy, we could save approximately $500,000 in total when we complete the full life cycling of the fleet. And we do not expect we need to increase the size of the fleet. We have 8 vehicles currently. We expect that even with a potential future fixed route and a 4th fixed route in a few years, we could still maintain current service levels with our current 8 vehicles. And then there are a variety of other important projects in the works. Later this year in 2026, as I talked about, we would like to extend those 3 fixed routes further. That would desirably happen during the summer. We're also this summer going to be doing safety audits and accessibility reviews of our transit stops and infrastructure. We're working closely with our planning team and developers to ensure that any new developments that are going through the planning and design stages are incorporating the transit infrastructure that they need. We're also working to put our transit system on Google Maps, so that should also improve ridership as well, with greater access and just awareness of our transit system. We're improving our industry partnerships to improve our benchmarking, so we're working more closely with other peer municipalities and their transit departments and sharing data and really working together to find efficiencies in our hybrid systems. We're working much more closely with our communications and marketing staff to ensure our website is up to date, and we're doing significant outreach regarding any service changes. And this year we'll also be looking at the paratransit service that is provided today within the town of Cochrane. Then moving forward in 2027, there will be other system enhancements and expansions. We would like to develop our own in-house transit stop planning and accessible design guidelines. We would like to implement a formal transfer system within the buses to accommodate more smoother transfers between routes. There's an opportunity to modernize our transit bylaw. We should also be looking at expanding our service hours, simplifying our payment app into one consolidated app, and introduce real-time vehicle tracking. So that's really taking our Google Maps integration to the next level, where riders can actually see if a bus is late or when their estimated time of arrival is. Now I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about our proposed 2027 fare increase. It's important to note that this presentation is for information purposes. We're not here to vote on a fare increase. The plan is to have the proposed fare increase reviewed and endorsed by council as part of your annual service rates review across the town. This table here shows our single ticket at $2.50, as well as the cost of our other products available by the town of Cochrane. Below the town, you'll see the other peer municipalities in the province of Alberta that we've compared our fares to. I'd really like to draw the attention to the red column for single tickets, because really the other products feed off of that. So typically in a fare review process, you work to establish what your new single ticket will be, and that really trickles out to your other products and dictates how they will increase as well to a degree. Currently, our single fare ticket is $2.50. As a direct comparison, the town of Okotoks is $3.50. The median across the municipalities we reviewed is $3. So if we were to increase our single ticket fare to $3, for example, this would not be a premium, this would be us achieving more alignment with our industry peers. A big reason why this has happened, that being us falling behind of our industry peers, is because when we launched our system in late 2019, it was called a pilot project. So it's my understanding that is why the town was not considering fare increases. There was a lot of unknowns of how far and how long we would go with this transit system. And most municipalities would typically implement a fare increase annually to keep with inflation. Now, why is a fare adjustment needed? Well, there's obviously rising operating and capital costs. As I talked about, our operating budget with Southland increases at 3% per year. It's also to improve our cost recovery and the financial sustainability of our system. The cost recovery metric is one way that administration can communicate to residents and to council that we can be good financial stewards of this service. So it's important to maintain a healthy cost recovery. It also allows us to maintain service levels and support future expansion. So as we look at ways to improve our services, we need to ensure we have healthy revenues to be able to fund those projects. We'd also like to increase the fare contribution so that we can also limit the property tax impacts. And minimal ridership impact is expected. So generally speaking, fare increases are generally inelastic. So for example, a 10% increase in fares would not decrease your ridership by 10%. The impact is a lot less. There is a relationship there, but we're not expecting a significant drop, especially because we're already starting from quite a depressed baseline at $2.50 anyways. So this table shows you a proposed fare for the town of Cochrane, which could be effective as January 1st, 2027. That would be increasing the single ticket from $2.50 up to $3. Is approximately a 20% increase. And the final column, which is percent difference from benchmark, that's comparing the proposed fare to what the industry median was in the previous table you saw. And then in conjunction with the increase to the single ticket, we would also see similar increases to the Book of 10 and the adult, senior, and youth monthly passes. It's important to note that Cochrane residents with a Level 1 Connect card currently receive a 25% discount through the province's low-income transit pass subsidy program. This is going to be maintained, and we're also currently working with the province to increase that 25% discount that we currently receive. So what are the potential impacts of a fare increase on our future cost recovery? So this year we're projecting a 12% cost recovery. If we were to increase our fare from $2.50 to $3 and the other associated passes as well, we're expecting we could achieve a cost recovery in 2027 of 13 to 15%. This would improve our revenue performance. It would offset the impacts of inflation. And overall, it would result in a more stable and modest improvement to the financial sustainability of our transit system. Now, this slide is just giving you a vision or a roadmap of how fare increases could occur over the next few years. This is not being proposed today, but just to show you that if in 2027, if we were to increase to $3, in 2028, we were increasing to $3.25, and then 2029 to $3.50, we could achieve a cost recovery in and around 16%. This is an aggressive push in a 3-year window in order to make up for some lost time in the past 5 years. And then after achieving that $3.50, the annual increases could normalize to be more aligned with inflation, for example. It's important to know that this is not proposing a premium fare by any means. As an example, in 2029, where a $3.50 fare is a potential, that is in line with what Okotoks is charging today in 2026. So just to give you an order of magnitude how we compare. So this is not a premium increase, even though that line does look aggressively sharp. This would just be doing some catch up to bring us more in line with the industry. And again, just showing how we would stack up into those recommended bands. So if we were to achieve that 15% by 2028, for example, that would put us into that more desirable and strong category for our cost recovery. And then lastly, the orange dash line off to the right side of the graph there, that's just giving you an idea of the order of magnitude of impact a fourth route could have on our cost recovery. So in 2029, if we were originally projected to achieve a cost recovery of 16%, if fares were $3.50, if we introduced a fourth fixed route, that would bring down the cost recovery to just about above 15%. So actually surprisingly not a major shift, although the introduction of a fourth fixed route would cost likely in and around $200,000 to $250,000 more operating dollars. So that's approximately the cost of a fixed route in 2026 dollars. That's the end of my presentation, and I open it up to questions from council.
Thank you for the presentation. Can I get a motion from council to accept this information?
I move that council receive the Colt Transit System Performance Update Report for information. Adam, I just wanted to say thank you and congratulations to the team on such a robust report, if that's the team. All three, right? Yeah, perfect, well done, well done. I have to say, I had a number of questions lined up to ask, and then you answered them all. So I was gonna ask about apps, and you've identified the story about the apps, and that we might be looking to merge those in a couple years, but operationally, we're contractually in a tough spot on that. More routes. You identified that we'd be looking at that and the impacts, both the service levels and the cost levels to do that, and also reassuring that we'd be able to do that within the existing contract and the existing buses. Also, any growth to the transit system, we're not gonna need to get more buses. When I was looking through, you were like right sizing. I'm like, I wonder what right sizing means. And then you came up with the perfect slide of a smaller little bus. So now I have an idea of what a right sized handy bus. So that was really great. I had a question. It was, what are we aiming for a possible, cost recovery? And then that came up that, in 3 years, we're looking at just matching with Okotoks, our comparables, at about 16%. So you answered that for me. And then a whole bunch of other questions that you answered that I hadn't even thought of. So thank you for the great presentation. I do have a couple for you. And as you know, with the regional route being canceled, and we had some concern there until Falcon stepped into the fray there. So what does that look with Falcon? So they're going to be picking up at the transit hub, and they're integrating, or they're dropping off whereabouts in Calgary? Or is it just the same?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. You know what? I'm drawing a blank now on the exact stop in Calgary. It was my understanding they were repeating what Southland was doing, but I don't want to say for certainty because they've merged the two routes into one. Previously on it was two separate routes, the Brentwood route and the downtown. Falcon is just doing the one route, but I can circle back to you on that, on the more specifics on how they've done that, because I don't want to say something and be wrong on that. I can say I have had other conversations with other transit providers, private transit providers in the industry as well. So a large service provider reached out to me, and they're internationally known, and they have offices service provided in the city of Calgary. They have interest in it. They're monitoring what Falcon is doing and seeing if there's an opportunity for them to insert themselves. I've had a discussion from a local person who owns a shuttle business who is monitoring it as well. They would be more interested if there was a partnership opportunity with the town and not doing it fully private themselves as well. So just to give you some other context, if there is other interest out there. And then More longer term, I don't believe this is the end of the story for regional transit, especially with the town administration starting the process of developing a scope for a future transportation master plan. That's going to be an opportunity where we can integrate transit into that transportation master plan and what regional transit looks like as well. So we're going to be undergoing that scoping process over the next couple months with the planning and engineering departments at the town, and working with a consultant on that as well.
That was a
Yep, I think that's
good
it.
answer. It seems quite hopeful with lots of different options. And one of the questions as the regional conversation was happening is, why can't we just, connect into the Calgary transit? So if you could speak to that. And of course, there's lots of kids that would like to be able to stay in Cochrane and go to school in the city. And, if there's a way to get better connection to the post-secondaries. So if you could just kind of speak to the current state of what that looks like.
Sure. Through you, Deputy Mayor. Firstly, I would look at it like a phased approach. So phased one, a new service provider has come in, they're running this service. The town is monitoring. So we are collecting feedback from residents, we're monitoring. There's no contract between the service provider and the town, so there's really no uncertainty on how long this service is going to be there and what it looks like. So our evaluation of regional connectivity between the town and the city of Calgary is not complete, it's ongoing. The fleet matter is a key sticking point for us. We have 3 spares right now that we cycle in with our fixed routes and on-request service. So to commit to that one vehicle daily being used for that regional service, it's a bit of a risk for the town. But the timing is coming up where in the next couple years, we need to get very serious about life cycling our fleet. And this is going to be a consideration. So we're currently in the process of planning what our fleet needs to look like, as you saw on the slide, and this is under review. So even though we don't have anything set yet, it's still under review with the town.
So I can jump in as well. So through the chair to Councilor McFadden, I think, when we're looking at that larger system and planning with transit, there's always trade-offs. And the component I think that's important, Adam had highlighted looking at that connectivity and coverage across the town and doing it kind of in that scaling and sustainable way. So based off of what we've looked at, aside from the private sector stepping in, if we were to prioritize a bus, a Colt bus to go to the city, we could easily do that. There's trade-offs, and I think that's the real piece that I think is kind of that conversation with council and probably our citizens is, do you want to prioritize a bus into the city over providing coverage to the citizens in the town? And when we were looking at the strategic objectives we had from that 5-year plan around kind of the things was to focus on getting it right inside of the town first. And that's part of the reason too that we've said, okay, if there's a private operator who's like to do it, they can do that. We'll focus on that internal system first. But if that changes and it's council's wish to focus on that, we could easily explore that and come back with a proposal as well. But as of today, and the direction we've received is kind of that focus internal first, but that's not to say that it's not an option in the future. And if that is something that council wished us to prioritize over that internal system, we could do that.
And I'd just like to affirm my commitment to making sure that we're doing the local solution as best as we can. My questions on the regional are coming from that's been the recent conversation with Loss and Falcon. So yes, please stay on track for my land, certainly. Let's make sure that the internal system is working as well as it can. And I did like a lot of the pieces that you'd shared. One of the pieces I did like that you'd identified is that the transit hub posting the different routes and the timing so people know what's going on. Does that also include the Rockview, is there information there for the Rockview Handy Bus? How are we integrating with them? And then also Swift from Gastonia, Dakota.
Through you, Deputy Mayor. Regarding Swift, yes, I am aware of advertising and information on how to register for Swift transit at the station. I'm not familiar if there is Rocky View Handy Bus materials there. I can follow up with that to confirm. But on our transit webpage, we do have links to both Swift and Rocky View Handy Bus as well.
Okay. Yeah, I just came up because you identified one of the gaps there was the paratransit needs, and that's their roundhouse, that's their wheelhouse. Anyway, so thank you for a great presentation. I think one of the wins I'd certainly had affirmed for me out of your presentation was that 300 rides a day is what we're actually servicing. So we're actually making life easier and more possible for 300 people a day. So it was great to see that stat. So thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Councillor Federico?
Thanks for all the information. Yeah, you definitely provided a lot more information than when I just read kind of the initial stuff, so thank you for that. I just have a question. Are we trying to stabilize the system versus grow the system? Because I feel like a lot of what you've talked about is about stabilizing it, right? Rather than necessarily growing. Because if we're talking about growing the system, and that's between more routes, I would assume that eventually you're going to have more fleet, because you can't grow ridership with the same amount of buses by adding more routes everywhere. So I'm just curious, is that kind of the goal? Like currently right now is that we're just trying to stabilize the system, have less unmet demand versus growing ridership? And if we are growing ridership, do we know how they're being tracked, like so that we know exactly who is new coming on the bus?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. I think the right way to phrase it is sustainable growth. So the population is growing. We're going to have to grow to meet those demands and maintain service levels, but we need to do it incrementally and sustainably. We need to get the foundation right. We're coming out of a pilot project. The pilot project has allowed us to identify what works and what doesn't work. We've very clearly identified that the fixed routes work more efficiently from a service and cost perspectives. So we need to prioritize our resources to getting the fixed routes right, because if we're going to scale, we need to scale with the right tool, and we've identified it's the fixed route. The on-request still does serve a very good purpose. It provides that service coverage to those neighborhoods that we are not yet in a position to extend fixed routes into, whether it be budgetary constraints or infrastructure constraints, but it also provides a temporary gap to fill the gap in those neighborhoods such as South Bow, where we're already seeing families moving in, and I was getting calls saying, are you getting a bus out here? And I didn't even know people were living there yet. It just came so quick. So we were able to, at no cost, put an on-request stop in that neighborhood, and as those communities grow, we can put more on-request stops as needed, and then eventually a milestone will be achieved where we say, now we're ready to introduce fixed routes. So the on-request provides that transition service before we get to fixed routes. But we really need to identify what's the most efficient way to provide the service so we can better scale up from there. Regarding ridership tracking, for the on-request system, the ridership tracking is really solid because you have to book a trip. We know a lot of information on our data on who's booking trips and getting all those numbers. It's a little more difficult on the fixed routes. Currently, we have a very basic system of a clicker on the bus that the bus drivers click, and we're able to know generally if it's in the AM or the PM on when the numbers are coming in and off the buses and what routes. But we have very limited data on the fixed routes concerning what the volumes are at individual transit stops, specific hours of the day, demographics, things like that. So that's definitely been identified as an opportunity to improve with respect to our data collection.
Okay, the only thing that I have concerns about is that because, and I mean, my family was one of them. Years ago, my kids tried to book the bus. They could never get on the bus. And eventually, I think a lot of us you kind of forget that the bus even exists, to be quite honest, because you've tried so many times to be able to get on the bus that you couldn't ever get there. So I guess when we launched the fixed route, and I understand it was kind of August, and then there was an election. So is there any way to do a big rah-rah or just to kind of reintroduce the idea of fixed routes to be able to encourage people who maybe were discouraged in the beginning to come back to the bus system?
Yeah, so through Councillor, through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Federico, so two things there, and I think Adam can chat a little bit more about kind of the communications plan and some of the ideas there. But I also just wanted to capture a little bit about the something the Canadian Urban Transit Association, their research demonstrates that generally you're looking at around, and Adam had this in his presentation, but I just wanted to capture it. You're looking around 18 months for people to get to that level of understanding a new transit system and using it reliably. So right now we're running off of kind of 6 months data, where you're looking for that 18 months before we're truly going to understand the impact of our fixed routes, and individuals saying, hey, I can use this bus to get to where I want to go. I can get from Sunset to the SLS, no problem. Lots of different ways campaigning, and maybe I'll let you jump in on that. But I just wanted to highlight that as I think that's an important piece of that it does take time for users to come back to a system. And then I think Adam can chat a little bit about kind of the ways that we're looking to promote it and bring it back to people.
Thank you, Matt. Through you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, we have various strategies we're going to be launching with our collaboration with our communications department at the town. So for example, last year when I was at the farmers markets at the SLS Center every Saturday, the focus was on the launch of our fixed routes. This year, it'll be a little more focused on how are we doing, how can we improve, but it'll also be a little bit of that. There's a lot of new residents coming into the town, so still introducing them to the fixed routes. We're also looking at an online engagement survey specifically for our transit system this year to get some feedback on how we're doing, how are the fixed routes, how are they serving residents well. We'd like to complete that before we get to the budget process later this year, so we have a better idea if there's any tweaks we need to make to our services.
Perfect. Yeah, that was going to be one of my other questions. Just I know that, through obviously dealing with a consultant, there was a lot of, questions being asked or them going out to the community, but I would be curious on a satisfaction survey now. I mean, I do have to say, I do think it's positive. The complaints that you read online are definitely have dropped down. But again, I just want to make sure that those aren't the people that have just gave up and just stopped complaining altogether, rather than kind of new people being happy with the service. And I guess my only last question I have is that I know that Banff, at their transit stops, they have like a live update as to when the next bus is coming or when you can expect to see Route 1, Route 2. Is that something that we would look forward to in the future, is being able to provide kind of live mapping at stops, not just at the station?
Mm-hmm. Through you, Deputy Mayor. So we've actually implemented that at the station, at that transit info wall. So that TV that's set up there actually tells riders this bus, the next bus for this route that goes to the SLS Center, as an example, is coming at this time. And then once that time passes, the table updates and gives you the next one. We don't have that real-time integration yet where it has a countdown or says, oh, it's out there now, go out there now. That is in the works. I'm thinking 2027 we'll be able to get that up and running. And then the actual schedule or map information outside at the stops. So what we've seen is more static signs. So you see on the transit stop pole, you could have laminated or behind a plexiglass an actual mini route map with the schedule for the route that services that stop. I think that's the next step. Maybe one day we'll get to something that's more live or digital or LED outside, but I think the next step for this is more those static maps, and that's in our plans for both the station and the SLS Center.
So in the consultants' left turn, right turn, their 5-year plan, they had talked about a capital investment in a CAD. I can't remember what the acronyms for, we can get that for you. But basically that allows you to integrate that live time with your buses, which then we could integrate into like a Google system that you would see that like, hey, I'm looking at my bus, I'm at the stop and it says your bus is arriving 2 minutes late or bus is on time. Again, it's a capital cost. I think the smaller systems like the station and SLS are that kind of preferable scaling sustainably. And then if we were to look at that type of major capital investment, that's where we could have that, not even necessarily at every stop, but just you'd be able to pull it up on your phone on Google.
And I guess maybe I have one more question, then I'll pass it on. When will we get the next update on transit? I guess this has been very, very good, but I think we've, from us around the table, already from last term. We've been waiting for a long time, and it feels like sometimes, they're kind of vague updates. So the next, I guess, qualitative data information transit update will happen when?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, well, I'd love to come back and give a fulsome presentation like this annually every year. And then in between that, we give our weekly council updates. So Transit tries to insert any useful updates for you as well. Be happy to workshop with you or meet with you throughout the year on any special projects or special topics that you'd like to discuss.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor McDonald?
Thank you. The first thing I want to say is that it's so wonderful to hear about all the improvements, and I want to applaud you, but I also want to applaud all your predecessors, because I know this has been a long work in progress, and I know it hasn't been easy. I also want to say that, like Councillor Federico, I've tried to book the bus for my kids. I've been unsuccessful, but I've also been successful sometimes. And putting my 11-year-old on the bus to go to violin lessons is, as a mom, just such a wonderful feeling. It's part of, I think, why we choose to raise kids in a place like Cochrane. And then having the Colt go past our house, but behind her, and I'm watching the driver make sure she gets home safely. I feel like that's a really uniquely Cochrane experience. And so for all the bad stories we've heard about the lack of availability, I also have really wonderful stories about my kids riding Colt. Are we eventually on our way to entirely fixed? Is that the dream, would you say?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, yes or no, it doesn't have to, it could be, but it doesn't have to be. There's gonna be decisions we make in the coming years as our fixed routes grow and grow and grow. And in conjunction with that, the on request shrinks and shrinks. And the on request, I believe the next step of the on request could be to help out more with local paratransit. Ultimately, the long-term vision could be just a paratransit. It could be more of a door-to-door service like that. So filling that gap.
Right.
But it does still serve a role, especially with the construction and the development going on in the town.
Yep.
There's a lot of areas it's just difficult to get fixed routes in. So this provides another degree of transit service that residents can be afforded.
Sure. And I love the idea of what you described with South Bow, where we can't get there yet with the fixed, but you can definitely send an on-demand there.
Correct.
As a kind of just really flexible solution until the fix makes sense. I just wanted to add, I'm the councillor who's on the Rockview Handy Bus, and it's in my council report tonight, but I'll give you a sneak peek. So far this year, they are up 20% for rides in Cochrane over 2025 for the same time period. The rest of their region is consistent from a year ago, but we're up 20%. So I thought that was really interesting. Did I see correctly that on the expansion map, Glen Eagles is, we just don't plan to send any buses to Glen Eagles? What's that about?
Yeah, through you, Deputy Mayor. So we have on-request service in Glen Eagles. The expansion of fixed routes has to happen in a phased approach based on priority. Glen Eagles, similar to Sunterra Heights, are very challenging communities to serve. The amount of cost that has to be incurred to get the buses out there on an hourly basis with a very low anticipated ridership, it kind of falls on the lower end of priorities when we look about where we're going to expand to next. Again, similar to my response about are we ever going to have on request in the future, we may get there. Every year when I come back to you with a performance update and we talk about where's the next priority for us to improve service, whether that's expanding to Glen Eagles and Sunterra, or do we want to take those resources and expand our service hours? Do we want to modify our fleet? There's a lot of other things to consider. So we're certainly open to reviewing as time goes on and as the community grows. But I would expect that the South Bow area, with the mixed use nature of it, the schools, the commercial development that's going to be located along the 1A 22 corridor there, there's a lot more opportunity for trip generation from that area. So that would likely take priority.
Sure.
I've got one thing to add. So, when we're looking at larger more mature transit systems like Calgary and Edmonton, they actually are using hybrid systems. So it's quite typical in an area like Calgary that an on-request system, they call it first mile, last mile. So you have your on-request system that connects you to the larger hub and then allows you to do that. So for an area like Glen Eagles, where we're not seeing that consistent user base, you use the on-request system to supplement it in a way that those people can still access your transit system, but it's not requiring that same level of investment. It also is a typical that they might use it as an off-peak hours. So if we wanted to start providing service in the late hours of the night, but we're not wanting to have our fixed routes running, you can use an on-request system. So, but as Adam's highlighted, it really is about those trade-offs and really figuring that out. So, I think for us to really focus on the unique infrastructure that our community has, we're probably going to have some form of on-request supplementing the fixed route system. But fixed route is much more efficient, so we'd like to see that be the norm or more often, with that on-request supplementing, whether it's paratransit or that first mile, last mile.
Right. Yep, that all makes sense. I have one more question, and I've brought this up in the past. Where are we at with students? I know it was a really intentional decision not to include students in our transit planning. How do we feel about that now with the fixed routes?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So when I joined the administration mid last year, I heard these discussions about students not being permitted or not encouraged to use the Colt local transit system. To my knowledge, we don't have a policy in writing that says they cannot. I've instructed Southland we would not be questioning riders coming on with a backpack who look school-aged from using our local transit system.
That's
we
great
should
news.
be encouraging it. I know there were some initial concerns about traffic congestion around the schools impacting our fixed routes, but we've largely been able to work around and with that. So that's more of a traffic operational concern. That's not really the crux of your question. So we don't have any policy against students riding Colt bus for whatever trip purpose. That's up to them, and we would
Great.
encourage anyone to use the Colt.
I love to hear that. I thought it was so strange years ago, and I've read the articles. I understand why the decision was made, assuming there'd be this kind of groundswell of students who were taking transit instead of their designated school buses, and then there'd be no room left on the bus for anyone else. But I feel like this far into the process, we know that's just not going to happen now. That's probably been disproven. So. I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think it's a lost revenue opportunity. If we had Colt stops closer to our schools, I do think you'd see kids taking advantage of that independence of small town living, and I think it's something that I would love to see considered down the road.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Singh?
Thank you, Adam. Question, I got the opportunity to ride one of the buses routes in their fixed route, and it was amazing. Trip was amazing in there, and right in the probably 10:30, it was half an hour ride in there. So while the ridership concentration on fixed route is encouraging, has the administration evaluated extending operating hours or improving schedule frequency to better support commuters and shift workers?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. On the question of operating hours, so that is something we're reviewing. It may be something that we flesh out a little more deeper as we near the budget planning process. When we come to you with our proposed 2027 budget, it may include additional operating budget for additional hours, but we're still reviewing that. Looking at historical data from when we just had the on-request service, there is a potential that we could be missing out on about 10% of potential ridership by not going 1 hour earlier in the morning and 1 hour later in the afternoon, just based on some of the analysis that we've done. But we're still reviewing that, and we're looking at it, should that be our priority in expanding the service hours, but it's something we're exploring. And then on your question regarding frequency, so currently our buses are on the 60-minute headway. That's really the lowest for a fixed route that you would go. The next step would be going up to a 30-minute frequency, 30-minute headway. It comes at a substantial cost, so you're looking at about $200,000 per fixed route to add a second bus. So it'll be about in the order of $600,000 to go from 60-minute headways to 30-minute headways. And in our case, you would typically want to do that if you're starting to experience some capacity concerns on the buses. We're certainly not there yet. We have a lot of reserve capacity on the buses. And although there is an argument that by improving the headway, we could induce additional new demand that maybe we're not getting, that's true. But as I said, it would come at a significant cost, a doubling of our fixed route operating expenses to go from 3 buses to 6 buses.
Question on your fleet, if you can pull up that slide, please.
Surely.
Yes. So I was driving yesterday on a highway and I saw an on-demand transit from City of Calgary and it was a minivan. I took a picture. I told my passenger to take a picture. I didn't drive. But it was very like 6-seat or 7-seat or whatever it could be, and probably could be serving the areas of Bow Meadows and Sunterra and Glen Eagles, and as you mentioned, bringing those people who want to use services to the Colt. Are there any options, or like, your administration's looking into that?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So as an example, the image of the reduced size vehicle that you see here on your screen, the white vehicles, that's actually the base model that the town of Okotoks is using. That's what they're actually using for their fixed routes, and it's worked really well. 8 general passenger seats and I believe 3 wheelchair spots. So that would be right sizing our fleet. The issue with a van would again be juggling and how we use it. Is it just for wheelchairs and accessibility reasons, or is it just for general purpose travel? Having something a little bit bigger than a van but smaller than our Colt buses could kind of fill both needs. So and at half the price of a Colt bus, it's a pretty good idea for the life cycling of our fleet. On your second question about more related to the costs and the drivers is the operating hours, paying the drivers to operate our fleet, that being our contract with Southland, is the significant majority of your operating expense. So regardless of really what vehicle you're driving, obviously there's differences in diesel and maintenance costs, but really the real driver of your costs is the driver driving the vehicle regardless of the fleet. So from an operating expense perspective, there's not a huge difference on whether we're using a van or a Colt bus. That's really more of a capital expense. From an operating expense, it's really the driver regardless of the vehicle type.
Okay, thank you. And then Councilor Padeco mentioned about that. Was there a talk in the pre-budget session that kind of putting up plexiglasses, or are we doing a modernization that say, hey, I call 403, whatever number is, where is my bus kind of thing? Are we leaning onto that side, or are we putting just on the major spot some timing of the buses?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So we're looking at integrating with Google Maps this year. If we complete that this year, I expect next year we can upgrade. They call it stage 2 or phase 2 integration with the live time technology. The buses are already retrofitted with GPSs that Southland uses. It's just a matter of how do we set up the technology to communicate that seamlessly to the riders. So that's in the works, that's coming. But also to your question, our customer service staff are always there at the station, and they receive a lot of calls and emails from the public. And sometimes they are calls such as, where's my bus? It hasn't shown up. Customers are typically immediately directed to Southland, and Southland Dispatch will provide them that information.
Yeah, and I wanted to appreciate you guys, the extending the areas, like in the east end, would the Big Hill Lodge would be covered in that part, would be a fixed lodge? And the newer neighborhoods in, let's say, Heartland, Heritage, West Hawk, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. What are we like aiming, 300 meters, 400 meters, or just expanding the stops in there?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. So we're looking at expanding our fixed routes this summer into those various other underserved neighborhoods. And then when we do extend a fixed route, we assume an approximate walking distance of 400 meters to be desirable. So we do our best to try to get most residents within that community within 400 meters, but obviously we are constrained at times with the road network layout that we have to work with.
And one final, as council look ahead to the future service expansion and fleet replacements, are there operational risk, contract limitations, or performance concerns council should be aware of at this stage?
Through you, Deputy Mayor, that's a good question.
Yeah, sure. Through the Deputy Mayor to Councillor Singh. So, as Adam had mentioned earlier in the presentation, when we talk about like contract limitations, we have a renegotiation. We're going to do a public RFP after our contract with Southland ends in 2027. So obviously some risk associated with that when it comes to, a competitive bid process. Although there are a lot of different companies in the industry, the economy and items are looking a little bit different. So we could see that our operating costs might change depending on what that process looks like. Obviously, administration will do our due diligence in getting the best price possible, but that's definitely something that could be considered there. We talk about some of the other constraints, even life cycling our buses, you're probably looking at a 2-year from your order to it coming to us. So when we're thinking about that, we were hoping to have the Rural Transit Solutions Fund grant application answered and have some of that funding coming to us already. No community has found that. The federal government's kind of paused that a little bit. The Canadian Urban Transit Association is working on advocacy in that space, but that is a risk that we should be preparing for, that we might not be receiving a grant in that space, and we might be having to life cycle these buses on our own from a capital cost perspective. What were the other things with contract? Sorry, there was contract risk, capital risk. Was there something?
Performance concern council should be.
Oh, performance concern. No, from a performance perspective, I think, the great thing of having someone like Adam on our team and really dedicated to this as their full-time perspective, anytime that there has been a minor concern or something that a citizen has been able to bring forward, Adam's been able to respond to them very quickly. We've had that opportunity to investigate any situations that are happening and resolve them. I think the piece that you see here too in Adam's presentation was we're listening to what citizens are having concerns with and being real about, here is what people are saying and here's what we're attempting to build over time. So from that performance risk concern, I wouldn't be concerned. I think for us, the focus is on getting as efficient as possible from a performance perspective.
Thank you, Adam.
Oh, thank you.
So that leaves me. I just have a couple questions. You answered all of them. My first question was, I was at the Cochrane Youth Summit. You were in attendance there as well, and you had your transit session, I guess, and there were quite a few youth in attendance, and I was wondering if there were any questions or comments or anything that you heard over and over again, or kind of just what your findings were there.
To you, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, you know what, it was very amazing to me being of a different generation of those youths now. Very little had driver's license or any intention of having a driver's license, and not really a lot of interest in it. So that was bit of a culture shock for me. Comparing it to my youth. And a big takeaway was there was a lot of information I was giving them that I thought was communicated clearly and they were unaware of. Telling them things about how our fixed route operates, how to book a trip on our on-request system, and getting stares from them saying, oh, well, I didn't know that, or I didn't know the fixed route goes there. So it really highlighted to me the importance of our communications. So we've really ramped up our integration with our communications department. I almost feel like I have one of their staff on standby for me, because any type of improvement to service levels that we try to do, anything really, communications is going to make or break it, and we need to get the messaging out. So that's something we're acutely aware of, that we need to focus on communications. We're going to be present at the SLS Center at the Farmers Market this summer, doing the online surveys. I'm going to be very active with our seniors groups, and we're finding ways to engage more with them, being present during seniors weeks at the various residences to provide them face-to-face information on how to access the system, as well as do a presentation to the seniors as well at seniors week. So there's a lot of ways that we can really get the message out and really help us ramp up the ridership for our transit system.
Excellent. Yeah, I thought it was a really valuable session, so I'm happy to hear you had some good takeaways. My second comment, or I guess question, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the developer-delivered stops. How do they, I honestly don't know how it works now. When we're building a new community out, is it the town that puts them in after the community is built out, or is it a consideration in the building process, the planning process? At what point does that connect?
Yeah. To you, Deputy Mayor. So since I've joined the town, I've now inserted myself in the planning process. So for most of our development applications that come through our planning and engineering departments for review and approvals, they do pass through my inbox, and I'm reviewing them to see if it's of any relevance to transit. If it is, I insert myself and review their site plan applications, for example, their neighborhood plans, to make sure they've adequately reflected the planned transit system for that neighborhood. Most large developments are required to submit a traffic impact assessment in order to receive their approvals. As part of that assessment, they are required to provide a proposed transit service in their neighborhood, essentially showing how our fixed routes will integrate through their neighborhoods, where those transit stops will be, acknowledging that they will be upfronting the cost and constructing those transit stop pads no different than a sidewalk. When we talk about needing money for transit stop infrastructure improvements out of taxpayers, from the taxpayers, we're primarily talking about retrofitting existing transit stops in existing mature neighborhoods. So we have a lot of work to do to create accessible transit stops in our existing communities, but for new communities through the planning or design process, the requirement is on the developer to construct those, no different than any other piece of municipal infrastructure.
Excellent, thank you. Those are my only two questions. So there's a motion on the floor, so I guess we'll call it to question. All in favor? Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Okay. 10 minutes? Okay, we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll be back at Okay, we're back. Next up, we have Robbie Loden here, who's our finance manager, and he's going to be presenting the next 3 agenda items, 3 bylaws. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm presenting the 2026 tax rate bylaws, agendas items 7C, 7D, and 7E. This presentation covers 3 bylaws for Council's consideration this evening. Bylaw 05-2026, the annual tax rate bylaw. Bylaw 06-2026, the annual community revitalization levy. And Bylaw 07-2026, the community revitalization levy supplementary bylaw. I will walk through the legislative context, this year's taxable assessment, our tax and requisition breakdown, the residential bill impact, a comparison against peer municipalities, and seek Council's direction on each bylaw. Tonight's presentation is structured into 8 sections. Sections 1 through 6 provides context, legislation, assessment, tax breakdown, bill impact, and peer comparison on the annual tax rate bylaw. Sections 7 and 8 will be focused on the annual community revitalization levy bylaw and the community revitalization levy supplementary bylaw. Under the Municipal Government Act, Council is required to set annual tax rates. The annual property tax bill is made up of 4 components: the municipal tax rate, set under sections 353 and 354 of the MGA, and 3 requisitions. The 3 requisitions are as follows. First, the provincial education tax, collected under the Alberta School Foundation Fund, or ASFF, to support education across Alberta. Second, the Rocky View Foundation requisition, which funds seniors' affordable housing. And third, the designated industrial property requisition. This funds the province's assessment function for industrial and linear properties. I'll note that Cochrane has 5 industrial and 25 linear properties under this classification. It's important to note that the education and Rocky View Foundation requisitions are collected by the town and remitted directly to the province. 2 key dates for property owners this year is that tax bills will be mailed on Friday, May 29th, and payment is due by Tuesday, June 30th. The foundation for the tax rate calculation is the total taxable assessment. For 2026, the total municipal tax assessment has grown by $809 million, an increase of 8.4% from 2025, bringing the total to approximately $10.45 billion. As the chart shows, Cochrane has seen consistent and strong assessment growth since 2022. This year's growth reflects both new parcel development and inflationary changes in the market value. It is worth noting that increased assessment does not automatically mean higher tax bills. The rate is adjusted to reflect the budget requirement. However, where a property's assessment increased more than the median property in the inventory, the owner will see a proportionally higher bill. This slide shows the 2026 tax levy and requisition compared to 2025. Municipal taxes are increased by $3.1 million, or 7.7%, to $43.2 million. This reflects the revenue requirement that Council approved for the 2026 budget. The provincial education requisition increased significantly, up to 19.6%, or $4.8 million, to $28.9 million. This increase is set entirely by the province and is outside of the control of the municipality. The Rocky View Foundation requisition has decreased by $47,206, or 7.4%, to a total of $582,794, reflecting a lower per unit levy from the foundation. The designated industrial property requisition has also decreased slightly by $4,716. The 4 call-out cards at the bottom summarize the total 2026 amount at a glance. I want to draw Council's particular attention to the provincial education increase. It is the largest single driver of the overall tax rate increase of Cochrane's property owners, and it is important to note that this is a provincial decision and not a municipal one. The donut chart shows the proportional breakdown of the total property tax bill. Of the total levy, 59% funds municipal services. 40% goes directly to the province for education, and 1% goes to Rocky View Foundation for seniors' affordable housing. To make the tax rate changes tangible, this slide shows for a median single-family dwelling assessed in Cochrane with an assessed value of $647,800 in 2026, up from $653,800 in 2025. The municipal levy on this home increased by $66, from $2,520 to $2,585, a 2.61% increase. This is directly reflective of the municipal budget increase. The provincial education component increased by $235, from $1,578 to $1,813, an increase of 14.89%, entirely driven by the provincial requisition. The Rocky View Foundation levy decreased by $5, down to $37 for 2026. In total, the property tax bill for a median single-family dwelling increased by $296, from $4,140 to $4,435, an overall increase of 7.15%. Of that $296 increase, $66 is attributed to the municipal taxes, and $235 is attributed to the provincial education. So roughly 79 cents of every additional dollar of this year's tax bill is provincially driven. Note that this is based on a median single-family dwelling assessed value. Individual bills will vary depending on how each property assessed value has changed relative to the typical inventory change. This table compares Cochrane's 2026 municipal residential tax rate against peer municipalities in the region. Cochrane's residential municipal tax rate of 0.00383,140, highlighted in orange on the screen, results in a municipal tax of $2,585 on the median residential assessment of $674,800. From this list, the town is the third lowest with a tax split of 85% residential and 15% non-residential. Compared to peer municipalities, Cochrane rate is lower than Airdrie, Calgary, Okotoks, Strathmore, and Leduc. Chestermere and Rocky View County have the lowest rates, though their service models and residential tax split differ significantly. Rocky View County, for instance, draws only 38% of its tax base from residential properties versus Cochrane's 85%. I would also like to highlight that at the time of this presentation, Airdrie, Chestermere, Leduc, and Strathmore did not have their 2026 tax rate information published. Once we have that published, I will revise the tables and provide that for council's information. There's one additional item to note before we move to the bylaw readings. Within our annual tax rate bylaw, Cochrane has an annexation agreement in place with Rocky View County that runs until 2029, covering 4 properties within the annexed area. Under this agreement, these properties are taxed at the municipal mill rate set by Rocky View County, rather than Cochrane's rates. Because Rocky View County's mill rate is lower than Cochrane's, this results in approximately $10,000 less in annual tax revenue. Administration is seeking council's approval of Bylaw 05-2026, the annual tax rate bylaw. The recommended resolution is that council give first reading, second reading, unanimous consent to proceed to third reading, and third reading of Bylaw 05-2026. This bylaw sets the 2026 municipal tax rates and requisitions as presented. It is standard annual bylaw required under the MGA and reflects the rates needed to fund the 2026 council-approved budget. That concludes the presentation of the 2026 annual tax rate bylaw, Bylaw 05-2026. I am pleased to answer any questions Deputy Mayor or Council may have.
Okay, so can we get a motion for first reading, please? Councillor McFadden?
Certainly, I'm pleased to move. Here we go. First reading, Bylaw 05-2026.
Thank you.
Call it to question. All in favor? Okay, and then we go to second reading. Can I get a motion for second reading?
I'll give second reading to Bylaw 05-2026. No questions.
Any questions? Councillor Federico?
Can you, just for the public record, state the 4 properties that are tax less for Cochrane, from Rocky View?
Through the chair to Councillor Federico, you're just wanting to confirm which properties they are?
Yeah.
I'm just going to confirm if we're able to
Through the deputy mayor to Councillor Federico, I'd have to get the list. I believe that they're in rolling trails, so it's the area just off of Highway 22 that was annexed in 2005.
Okay, is that where all of them are?
I believe so.
Okay. Yeah,
I
if you-
can confirm the details exactly, the four, for you and follow up after council. I just don't have that at my disposal right now.
Perfect, thank you. I think it
That's,
just,
that is the correct location, I just wasn't sure about the
okay,
properties.
that's good. As long as I know kind of the
Yes.
type of location that we're talking about is more what I was really looking for. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? Okay. Call it to question. All in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Singh.
Would you recommend like having a long-term strategy about the increase of the provincial requisition over the next several years so that residents can understand what they are getting into, like, for long-term increases, if there are possibility or something in there?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Singh, it's certainly something that administration and council can work on in terms of advocacy through the province to sort of understand what their rates will be kind of moving forward.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, I'll call it to question. All in favor? Okay. Third reading, Councillor McFadden. Oh, wait,
I'll
sorry,
move,
this is the different one.
unanimous consent to go to third reading.
Yep, is that good? Unanimous consent to go to third reading. I'll call the question. Okay, passed. And then the final third reading, can I get a motion for third reading?
I'll move third reading of Bylaw 05-2026.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, passed unanimously for third reading. I think that brings us to the next agenda item, correct, which is 7D.
That is correct. We now move to the Community Revitalization Levy Bylaw 06-2026 is the annual Community Revitalization Levy Bylaw. It must be passed each year to continue collecting this levy. I will briefly recap what the CRL is and its current financial status before seeking council's approval. The Community Revitalization Levy, or CRL, was established to facilitate the revitalization of 25.3 hectares, approximately 62.5 acres of underutilized land within Cochrane's downtown core. The levy is designed to incentivize redevelopment of the area, and it is important to note that the CRL revenue are legislatively restricted and they cannot be directed towards general municipal operations. The levy is calculated on the basis of incremental assessment growth above a fixed baseline. The baseline was established using property assessments as of December 31st, 2012, at which time the assessed value of the properties within the CRL area was $3.7 million. The 2026 incremental assessment, representing the growth in assessment value above the 2012 baseline, is $150.7 million. Both the municipal tax and the provincial education rates are applied to the incremental value, and the resulting revenues flow directly into the CRL fund. As property values within the CRL area increase over time, the incremental tax revenue generated by the growth is captured and reinvested into the downtown core through the approved capital projects, rather than flowing into general revenue. The CRL is intended for 4 capital projects with estimated expenditures of $13 million. The CP Rail pedestrian crosswalk at $4 million, the largest single project at 31% of the total costs, public space improvements at $3 million, contribution to the Art Center at $3 million, and the shared parking facility at $3 million. On the revenue side, the news is very positive. As of 2026, including the current year's estimated levy of $1.6 million, the cumulative revenue collected is $12.3 million, representing 94.9% of the total $13 million projected costs. The CRL has been extended to 2032, which provides sufficient time to collect the remaining balance and completion of the projects. Administration is seeking council's approval of Bylaw 06-2026, the annual Community Revitalization Levy Bylaw. The recommended resolution is that council give first reading, second reading, unanimous consent to proceed to third reading, and third reading of Bylaw 06-2026. Passing this bylaw continues the annual CRL collection for 2026. This concludes the presentation of the 2026 Annual Community Revitalization Levy Bylaw 06-2026. I'm pleased to answer any questions that Deputy Mayor or Council may have.
Okay, first reading, Councillor McFadden.
I gotcha. I move that council give first reading to bylaw 06-2026.
Call it to question, all in favor?
Questions or?
Not on first reading, next one you can. Sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Call it to question for first reading, all in favor? Okay, passed unanimously. Second reading, can I get a motion for second reading?
I'll move that council give second reading to bylaw 06-2026. I did have one question before I turn it over to my colleagues. We'd identified there was a $3 million set aside for a shared parking facility. Have we spent out of that reserve for any projects to date, or are we still building into that section?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor McFadden, we have not started on that project yet.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Any more, okay. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thanks very much. Same slide there, Robbie, please. Contribution to Arts Center, that'd be the same answer, that obviously it hasn't been spent on anything. I haven't heard, pardon me. I haven't heard in my 9 years' time what that's actually going towards. I guess that's a future projected possible arts center. We don't have any further clarity on that.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wilson, that would be correct. We have not, there's been no expenditures on that project yet. We will be looking, administration will be looking to bring back a more comprehensive report on the CRL later this year. So we'll be able to provide some more updates on those.
Okay, thank you. And in the top two there, pedestrian crossing's already been built, so I assume that entire budget has been utilized.
That is correct.
And then public space improvements, how have we done with that?
It's partially expended on. I don't have the exact breakdown on that project, but there has been some spending against that work.
Okay, and any specific area where that took place? Would that be the transit hub station area, I would assume, or?
I don't have specifics on that, but I'm happy to bring that back.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wilson, there are some improvements at the station, and then as you go down Grand Boulevard, there is outside the seniors facility, there's the wider sidewalks and the additional landscaping that's been completed in that area. So that's within the CRL, as well as some of the improvements in the quarry as well.
Okay, excellent. And final question, any idea how much of that $3 million budget remains unspent?
I'd have to look into that further with Mr. Loudon.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Wilson, I can provide a breakdown of those project costs if that'd be helpful. I don't have that with me today,
Sure,
but I can bring that back.
Future, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thanks for bringing up the slide. It's one we haven't talked about in a while, and it's good to see that there's budget remaining and decisions to be made in the future on where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Singh?
Thanks, Robbie. Do you know what specific evidence would you support or reject the idea that CRL boundaries should be expanded?
Sorry, through the chair to Councillor Singh, do you mind repeating the question again?
What specific evidence supports or rejects the idea that CRL boundaries should be expanded? Are we have a capacity to expand, or like in future, or is it just set that's the only?
Through the chair to Councillor Singh, that's a great question. I don't, if we were looking to expand it, we would have to go to the province. I'm not sure if there's any desire to expand that.
Councillor Singh, is there a specific item that you were looking for with this? Because Mr. Loudon's correct. If we were to look to expand it, we would have to go to the province to get approval for the expansion, because it really was, as he articulated in his presentation, to revitalize that specific area. There have been some discussions about doing a second CRL in another location in Cochrane. We haven't pursued that though. But is there a specific area around that you were looking to expand that to, or an underserved area?
No, my was on a very generic question that can this be expanded, or can the model there, the utilization of space is well used and businesses are thriving, and can we remodel that same thing somewhere else, or is there administration have some suggestions or something in there, whatever?
Through the chair, Councillor Singh, we've explored some different options, and certainly that's something in a workshop we could have some further discussions on. There are some pretty specific criteria for the expansion of the existing one that we would have to meet. So it's something that we can always explore with council if that's so desired.
I might have a follow-up, and you might have answered it, but I'll say. So if council were to deciding today whether to approve the CRL again from scratch, knowing current outcomes, would administration recommend it unchanged, or would the structure, scope, or governance be redesigned?
Well, Councillor Singh, I think it's probably been one of the more successful CRL projects in the province, so I would say that we would absolutely do it again. Like even when you see this list before you, there's the Arts Center. A lot has changed in the time, and Councillor McFadden or some of the other councillors who've been here for a long time can probably speak to that better than even myself. I think there's some subtle tweaks that we would make to the CRL, but it's been an overwhelming success. And to see the growth in that area and what it's become, I think we would do it again without a doubt.
Thank you.
Councillor McFadden?
Wanted to speak to that. I think it was 2012 by the notes in here. I'm glad somebody's documenting these things. That came forward, and at the time, it was very innovative. Our financial lead at the time was very creative. We were one of only 3 municipalities to advance into this, so it was Calgary, Edmonton, and ourselves. And without that, we probably would not have been able to advance the quarry such as we did. It was innovative. I think we won an award for it at the time. So one of those successes we can learn from, but yeah, if we could do it twice, we should do it twice. And yeah, I don't think there is much possibility to expand the boundaries of it, because the boundaries are set by the contamination outline of the site. And I think at the time, if I recall the decisions, it was reflective of the max contamination, so I don't think there's an opportunity to go back for that site. I am sure that the team is maybe looking at some other opportunities because it was such a success. Yeah, so that was a great story there. And I think to the question around the contribution to the Arts Center, even like that council of the day had recognized that the arts is a gap that we've never stepped into servicing properly. And so that's where this was coming from. And then when we did the Tri-Site project, that was envisioned that this would fund into the Tri-Site piece. So it's been an ongoing long conversation for sure, and there have been changes to it. But overall, like a huge win, like the CP Rail pedestrian crossing, those are always huge, troublesome projects. The public space improvements, I mean, the quarry's got an amazing sense of place about it thanks to those. The Arts Center, I really hope we can find a way of investing with that. And then the shared parking facility, I think we all know that we need a solution for that downtown too from various different aspects. So yeah, a big win across the board, and Cochrane did a really good job with that one.
No more questions? Okay. Councillor McDonald.
Thank you. The Arts Center, we have no current plans to be building an arts center. Thank you for that history, because I've been sitting here scratching my head about it. So the Tri-Site was being explored. I know there's been many, many visions for what that should have been or could have been. So now that there is nothing on the capital projects list for an arts center, what happens to a pot of money like this?
Through the chair to Councillor McDonald, that funding would sit until a project was advanced and spent against it.
From a governance perspective, if the Arts Center was 100 years from now, feasibly, what opportunities exist to reallocate, or none?
If we were to look at reallocating, that would be something that have to go through to the province for approval.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that's the course. I was just curious.
Nope, good question.
And the other portion, it always has to be spent within the boundary of the CRL. So we would need to go back to the province, and that's where, to Councillor Singh's question, if we were, again, it's 14 years ago though. So I think it's been a tremendous success. But is the art center going to be specifically in this area? I think there's some opportunities that we will explore as administration and council that could unlock opportunities in that area with the funding available. Or alternatively, if there's a different idea, go back to the province and say, this is something else we could fund in this area, utilizing those resources and get the approval.
Okay, no more questions. We'll put it to a vote. All in favor? Okay, passed unanimously. Can I get a motion for unanimous consent to go to third reading? Councillor McFadden?
I'll move unanimous consent to third reading of Bylaw 06, 2026.
Any questions? Okay, all in favor? And finally, third reading.
I'll move third reading of Bylaw 06, 2026.
Okay, call to question. All in favor? Yeah. And last one. Okay, we have the next one, 7E, and this is our final bylaw.
Thank you. The third and final bylaw tonight is the CRL Supplementary Bylaw, Bylaw 07, 2026. This is a companion bylaw to the annual CRL and deals with specific timing situations for new properties. The supplementary bylaw applies to new properties within the CRL area that are completed on or before October 15th of the current year. Its purpose is to ensure taxation is consistent with how other new construction is handled throughout Cochrane. Under Bylaw 07, 2020, new properties completed partway through the year are assessed and taxed from their completion date on a prorated basis. The CRL supplementary bylaw extends the same principle to the CRL area, applying both the municipal and education CRL rates to these newly completed properties. Without this bylaw, there would be a gap in CRL levy collection for properties that come online after the January 1st assessment date, but before October 15th. This bylaw closes that gap and ensures equitable treatment across all properties in the CRL area. Administration is seeking council's approval of Bylaw 07, 2026, the CRL supplementary bylaw. The recommended resolution is that council give first reading, second reading, unanimous consent to proceed to third reading, and third reading of Bylaw 07, 2026. This bylaw applies to the CRL rate to new properties completed in the CRL area on or before October 15th, ensuring equitable and complete levy collection of the year. This concludes the presentation of the 2026 CRL Supplementary Bylaw 07, 2026. I'm pleased to answer any questions that Deputy Mayor or Council might have.
Thank you. First reading, Councillor McDonald.
I'll make the motion that council give first reading to Bylaw 07, 2026.
Okay, call it to question. All in favor? Passed unanimously. Second reading.
I move that council give second reading to Bylaw 07, 2026.
Okay, question? Councillor Singh?
Thank you, Robbie. Could you explain or cut it through, is this bylaw intended to create an additional revenue stream on top of annual CRL? Or is it simply ensuring that new developments are captured under the same CRL framework as existing assessed properties?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Singh, it would be the latter. It would be just applying to properties that come online after the January 1st date and before October 15th.
So, for example, if you can give me an example, so if new builds there, they would fall under the new process.
So if a new build came online between that January, that 15th date, or sorry, after the 15th date, this would apply for that supplementary portion.
Supplementary portion, okay, no worries, thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, call it to question. All in favor? Okay, third motion.
I move that council give unanimous consent to go to third reading of Bylaw 07, 2026.
Any conversation? No, call it to question. All in favor? And lastly, third reading.
I move that council give third reading to Bylaw 07, 2026.
Okay, no discussion, so I'll call it to question. All in favor? And passed unanimously. Thank you, Robbie.
Great, thanks everyone, appreciate it.
Okay, that completes the business component. Now we move on to notices of motion. Don't think there are any notices of motion. So now we'll move to the mayor's report. The mayor's not here, so then that brings us to councilors' reports. Councilors' reports? Sure. Yeah. Councilor McDonald?
Thanks. Disability advocacy is a huge passion of mine, and we have heard concerns from members of our community who will be affected by changes to the provincial AISH program. For anyone who doesn't know, AISH stands for Assured Income for the Severely Handicapped. On July 1st, AISH is transitioning to include a second program called ADAP, Alberta Disability Assistance Program. I'm working on learning as much as I can about the launch of ADAP. The goal is that in the coming weeks, Council may decide to join the growing list of municipalities asking the provincial government to pause the transition process. Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, Lethbridge, Camrose, Claresholm, just to name a handful, have joined this conversation and are asking the province to pause that July 1st rollout. I'll continue to work with administration on this, and I'll bring back more information to Council. Members of the NEP task force invited me to join them at the Glenbow Ranch Foundation to learn about the Glenbow Ranch volunteer and education programs. The Natural Environment Protection Task Force speaker series will kick off on June 11th. Information is coming out soon, but definitely hold your calendar. It's going to be a really, really great evening. The NEP committee members have been involved as administration selects the proponent who will conduct the environmental assessments of the 6 critical areas identified in the terms of reference. And it's great to see that work progressing. The Cochrane Society for Housing Options had their AGM on April 29th and were able to welcome a new board member, taking their board to 8 members, plus Councillor Fedeko and myself. Just a little update from CSHO, their waitlist for housing is at 135 people or families. The demand for affordable housing is growing with Cochrane's population. They cited people losing secondary suites, mainly due to family members of landlords moving in or landlords selling the property, is identified as a reason that the waitlist is growing. Also, people living in local campgrounds are looking for more stable housing, was mentioned. Home Reno Heaven is the social enterprise arm of CSHO, and that's an easy way that we can all support housing options in Cochrane. And they are going to be opening on Sundays throughout the summer, starting on May 17th. The income thresholds for 2026 were released, and for Cochrane, they have adjusted to their threshold incomes to qualify for affordable housing. So I won't read them all out, but starting at a studio, the threshold is now $57,500. And finally, as my preview earlier would have suggested, a little update on the other committee I sit on, which is Rocky View Handy Bus. Our April meeting was canceled, but I got an update sent to me by the executive director. Really interesting that Cochrane's ridership is up 20% over last year, where the rest of the region is consistent. They're getting a lot more efficient at Rocky View Handy Bus. They're launching a new scheduling system, and they're expecting to see great efficiencies where this automated system will have an algorithm that's constantly correcting. So everything I believe until now was quite manual, but now with this new software, when a cancellation happens, it'll just automatically slot in the next person who's waiting. So really exciting improvements happening there. And then just because of timing and history and putting off fare increases for a great number of years, Rockview Handy Bus is planning to raise fares up to $4.50 for every 10 kilometers of estimated travel, and that will take place in June. That's all my committees. Thank you.
Okay. I don't think we need a motion until the end, right? Until everyone's counselor? Okay. Councillor Singh?
I'll be attending my seniors advisory meeting on May 13th and FCSS advisory board meeting on May 14th. Over the past week, I had the opportunity to connect with residents, colleagues, and community partners through several meaningful events across town. I was pleased to join Councillor Gale in celebrating first anniversary of Farmhouse Cafe. Congratulations to the owners, staff, and everyone in the community who supported this local business. And also had an opportunity to volunteer at McDonald's drive-thru at the McHappy Day. It was fun. And looking ahead, on May 14th, I'll be attending Junior Culture Fest at Cochrane High School. And some other, like parking in the downtown area continue to be a concern, with customers often circling to find available spaces. I'll work with administration to explore interim solutions to improve parking access for patrons while long-term strategies are considered. with goal of supporting local businesses and enhancing the overall downtown experience. I'll also collaborate with administration to improve interim fire advisory and safety signage in parks where fire pits are open, fires are permitted. This initiative will help increase public awareness, particularly for visitors and new residents, regarding fire bans and safety requirements, supporting fire prevention efforts, and reducing pressure on emergency services ahead of summer season. And finally, I'm looking forward to attending my first Federation of Canadian Municipalities annual conference and trade show from June 4 to June 7 in Edmonton. I'm honored to represent our team and to engage with municipal, provincial, and federal leaders from across the country. I'll also be working with colleagues and the administration to share key priorities from Cochrane and highlight the important work being done in our community. Thank you.
Okay, can I get a motion to accept his information, please? Councillor Fideko?
That motion.
Okay, call it to a vote. All in favor? Passed unanimously. And then that brings us to closed session. There are 2 closed session items. Can I ask for a motion to go? Okay,
I move that we go into closed session.
call it to vote. All in favor? We're back. Can I get a motion to come out of closed session, please? Councillor McFadden, all in favor? Passed unanimously. And then we have a motion coming out of that. So can I get a motion? Councillor Singh,
I'll make a motion that council direct that the closed session discussions remain confidential pursuant to section 29(1)D of the Access to Information Act, and further that council direct administration proceed with the option 1 and present it in closed session.
any conversation? Call it to question. All in favor? Okay, passed unanimously. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. So call meeting adjourned at 9:18 p.m.